Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. Hello, I'm Jami Morain, and I'm with Sam Bailey, and we are here with two ESU professors to talk about the current situation in Ukraine. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Okay, well, I'm Michael Smith. I'm the chair of the Social Sciences, Sociology, and Criminology Department, and I study American politics.
And I'm Chris Lovett. I teach European history at ESU, and I've been here since 1996.
Great. Awesome. So just to get started here, can you tell us why students should care about what's happening in Ukraine?
Okay, I think it's important for them to realize the geopolitical implications of what's happening in another part of the world and the impact it may have on their lives directly.
And I would add, it also the impact it has on American politics. I mean, this is an election year after all.
Is this going to affect the material lives of American citizens?
Yes, it should. You're going to be paying higher gas prices and commodity prices as a result of the fighting, and basically the sanctions can be placed on Vladimir Putin and his oligarchy that surrounds him. Today they didn't imply cutting off Russia from the SWIFT system, nor did they boycott oil and natural gas, petroleum products coming out of Russia. But that may be down the road. And if that happens, we're going to pay higher gas prices.
Dr. Lovett's absolutely right. The world is particularly dependent on Russia as a source of natural gas, which happens to be an alternative to other carbon-based fuels. Natural gas is a global warming gas, but when it's burned cleanly, it doesn't release global warming gases. So it's very popular. We don't get a lot of our gas there. We have a lot here in the US and Canada, but Europe does. And anytime something affects that market, it bounces all around the world. Everything's all interconnected.
For Russian crude was over $100 a barrel, go as high as $130, $140 a barrel, which would probably increase gas prices at the pump up to well over $4, closer to $5.
Wow. Could this situation escalate into a third world war?
No, this is not going to lead to world war unless the Russians actually attack a NATO power. But it's going to strain the current political system that we've had since 1945. It seems like Putin is trying to return to the world as it existed prior to 1939, where you had spheres of influence. I think he would like to be the dominant power in Europe. He would like to see China the dominant power in Asia, and maybe a weakened America as a dominant power in the Americas. This is a very dangerous game that he's playing. As I told my students today, it's like a cross between 1938 and 1939. Where Hitler. Well, let me say this: Putin is not Adolf Hitler. He may be a Stalin light, but he's not Adolf Hitler. But he follows the same sort of playbook, using a Russian minority in Ukraine to achieve his strategic aims. By playing up their alleged persecution, it allows him to occupy the Crimea and in the Donbass region. He's using this now as a pretext to invade the whole country. Whereas in some cases, the Ukraine is a threat to Putin directly by offering the Russians themselves an alternative to one-man rule in Russia. If Ukrainian democracy works, and it appears that it was until the attack, then why can't the Russians have what the Ukrainians have? Why can't Russian opposition leaders fear for their lives, or why they're incarcerated, or why they're forced in exile? And the same thing is happening not only in Russia but Belarus, and in Kazakhstan, and other places in the Soviet Far East, or the Russian Far East.
Is there a diplomatic solution in sight?
No.
What do you guys think are the odds that the US is going to be pulled into a ground war in Poland?
No, it's not. Oh, well, you know, if he attacked Poland, that's another matter entirely. You know, that's a Poland's a NATO state. You know, as you have a defensive alliance, you have Article 5, which requires all NATO powers to basically come to the aid of a power that's been attacked. You have, say, for instance, Sweden and Finland. You know, if Putin's serious about recreating the Russian Empire, Finland used to be part of the Russian Empire. The Baltic states were once part of the Russian Empire. Those frontline states are in a serious bind right now. And if a war breaks out, it could happen over at least the Baltic states. Finland is thinking about joining NATO, and so is Sweden. So Putin may have overplayed his hand, because if his goal was to weaken the Ukraine and weaken the EU and weaken the NATO alliance, he failed. He's only strengthened it.
Yeah, so you guys have kind of touched on how this looks based on and compared to historic wars and events. Can you draw a little bit more clearly about how this is mirroring past historic wars and situations?
This is a complete rerun of what happened in 1938 with the Sudeten crisis. You had Adolf Hitler playing upon the Sudeten Germans, who were never part of Germany in the first place. They were part of Austria, using a fellow named Conrad Heinlein as their mouthpiece to up the ante every time the Czech government was willing to grant concessions to the German minority, and it was never enough. The British didn't want to get involved in a war in Central Europe. Neville Chamberlain made a comment: "How can we have young men fight for a country that they don't know anything about?" That argument can be made, by Donald Trump today. How many Americans know where the Ukraine is? How many Americans know where Belarus is? How many Americans understand the role of NATO in the world? I discussed this morning, and some of my students didn't have a clue. They were worried, but didn't have a clue what was actually going on.
So you keep on bringing up Trump? How does he play a part in all of this?
Dr.
Well,
Smith?
That's a domestic political question. I can do that one. Well, I was just thinking this morning about how different things are from the Cold War. And I don't mean to romanticize the Cold War at all, but particularly toward the end of the Vietnam War, there was this narrative that nobody was pro-communism, but the Republicans were particularly anti-communist and would often use the phrase soft on communism to describe the Democrats. And the Democrats were also anti-communist, but weren't wanting to spend as much on the military, or were opposed to some of the US military involvement in Latin America, things like that. So it was, how far do we go to fight the Soviet Union? Today, it's completely changed, because it's not on a spectrum of how many resources would you spend to fight. Now it's Russia, not the Soviet Union. We literally are divided on whose side we're on. Former President Trump has expressed admiration for Putin. He worked with Putin when Trump was president. And so there's not a consensus in this country about which side to take. And that, again, I think is exactly what Putin was wanting from the United States. Because if we're all agreed on which side we're on, but
This is
we
the way it was
disagree about what
in
to do about
1939, 1940, and 41.
Go ahead, Dr. Levitt.
Yeah,
You're up.
this is almost like 1930, 39, 1940, and 41 with quote unquote the original American First. When you had the American First Committee that was opposed to American entry into the war. And then the American public was divided 50-50. Here it's like maybe 45% support the Ukrainians, 30% are opposed to follow, say, the Fox, Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson line, and then you have about maybe 25% who really don't know what's actually going on. And so that's where they were. I sort of suspect that if we had social media in 1939, 1940, and 41, America may not enter the war at all. I mean, they would have blamed, say, for instance, Franklin Roosevelt for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Matter of fact, they actually did that. So it's and we probably wouldn't have declared war on Germany until Germany declared war on us. It's really mind-boggling, but it's almost like that period of time when Americans didn't know who was the good guys and who were the bad guys. And in some respects, it took the immediate post-war period for Americans to figure that out. Now, there was a time when some Americans said, "Better red than dead," and there are some people that think that way today.
Very interesting.
Matter of fact, it used to be better dead than red, but there's some people who said, no, it's better to be red than dead.
That's crazy. Does anything that's happening in Ukraine right now inspire fear in you guys? Are you worried about this?
I'm too old to be called up. I mean, I've already served my time. There's a possibility I could be mobilized, but then they would have to get the sick, the lame, and the lazy before they get to me. But no, I don't fear what's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a World War III. I just wish there's a way to help the Ukrainians fight back against Russian imperialism.
I think for my part, I agree. I don't think this is a World War III. I agree with Dr. Lovett. And I hope the way you said earlier, Dr. Lovett, is correct, that the Russians may have overstepped. One thing that I do worry about is that Putin, and he's done this with Ukraine just this week. I shouldn't say it's just Putin, it's the Soviet establishment, that they have this tactic of sowing chaos.
Yes.
So earlier this week, for example, there were cyber attacks against Ukrainian
active
banks.
measures, it's called.
Yeah, active measures.
Yes.
And we've had those
Active
against
measures.
the United States too, mainly through posts on social media. But we've had a few voting machines hacked and so forth. Those should not be connected to the internet. Don't even get me started on that. And so I am a little concerned about that sowing chaos strategy.
That's their goal.
I don't think Russian troops are headed to the United States with guns. That's not going to happen. Okay. But this chaos business, I really think Russian involvement has escalated the current political climate in our
Definitely,
country.
I totally agree.
And they could also go after banks.
Yes.
They did that in Ukraine. Things like that. I'm more worried about that than I am about there being Russian troops in Kansas City. I don't think that's going to happen. But this chaos business, I really think that the world needs to get a handle on this.
Yeah. Russian active measures are really a problem. I could see this on Twitter accounts. I've been following this whole thing on Twitter, and you could tell who's a Russian troll, who's working for the Russian research agency in St. Petersburg, who's masking themselves as an American, and they play that game, and they're very good at it. The United States is an open society, and they can be easily manipulated on Facebook, social media platforms, even commercial news channels, Newsmax, One American News Network, also play into Russian propaganda campaigns, because they make it appear that if I'm a Republican, I despise the Democrats, and I don't trust any Democrat at all because they're not on my team, they're not part of my tribe, and the Russians amplify that, and they're very good at it.
And might I add that the only line of defense, really, I'm all for cybersecurity, and we could continue beefing that up, but the only line of defense really is us and you all as future journalists. There's just no way to build an impenetrable firewall against this stuff like Dr. Lovett says, in an open society. It's just not possible that for us to be rational to be careful about what we believe, and also just to engage in smart practices, backing up data and using, local firewalls and things like that. It really, it's us. The government can't do this. They can only help. It's us that have to do this.
Have you ever been to Ukraine?
I've been to Ukraine.
What is it like?
I was there during Soviet times, and Kiev was they considered to be the Paris of the Ukraine. It was a beautiful city. The buildings were beautifully well kept. When I was in the Ukraine, they thought I was a German, and they were a little distant with me until they found out I was an American, and then they want to hug and squeeze me and kiss me and all this other stuff. But they're very friendly people. They have a desire. Well, now they have a desire to be independent. They've always wanted to be independent. They were always being suppressed by the Russians. The Russians have used it as their breadbasket, but there's a long history of Russian abuse, mistreatment, the collectivization campaign, the mass famines, starvation famines of the Stalinist years, the Gulag, the secret police, a suppression of Ukrainian culture. I mean, it's rampant. The Ukrainians, when they had a chance in 1991 to break away, they did. And the Russians, particularly Putin, saw that as the darkest day in Russian history. And he wants to return the Slavs to greater Slavdom, so to speak. And that's what this is all about.
So what do you guys think will happen if Russia successfully takes over Ukraine?
They'll establish a friendly government, a Putin-esque government, a satrap of Moscow. There will be purges of intellectuals in the Ukrainian academy. Dissent will be crushed. There'll be no freedom, and people will try to get it out. On the other hand, I think that there's a possibility of an insurrection. It would behoove the West to allow the Ukrainians to create a government in exile, like they did with Charles de Gaulle in France in 1940. Smuggle arms into the Ukraine and turn the Ukraine into another Afghanistan for the Russians. Now, there have been reports, I don't know if these are true or not, that Russian mothers are saying that their troops were swindled into going into the Ukraine. They were lied to, by Putin. The Ukrainians need more Stinger 1s and Stinger 2s and more Javelin missiles to slow down the Russians, to at least make the Russians pay a dear price for this. I feel sorry for the Ukrainians. No one deserves what's happening to them right now.
So today in Mr. McCoy's class, we were watching some of the news footage about it. And I personally thought that was very terrifying to see, like they were showing like some missiles launching over and stuff. And Mr. McCoy talked about how there's a good chance like by tomorrow or so that the capital will be taken over by the Russians. Should they, I mean, is that terrifying? I know we already talked about, is that afraid, but I mean, I think that's kind of terrifying. Should students be terrified? What do you guys think?
Well, I think what could happen is the Russians enter Kiev. It could be house-to-house fighting. It could be like, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened in Chechnya. The Russians were involved in suppressing the Chechens for 10 years. They turned Grozny, the capital city of Chechnya, into a pile of rubble. They're capable of doing that. And I would be frightened for the Ukrainians. It would be frightening for anyone to go through that. The fear of that happening in the United States is really low. That's not going to happen. But you never know. Putin is as the French have said, when President Macron visited with Putin, his aide said after discussing this whole crisis with him, beforehand, he appeared to be unhinged. He was totally unreasonable. At this stage of the game, Putin could do anything. He's surrounded by men that are totally yes men that tells him only what he wants to hear. in what he already believes. That's scary. That's frightening.
Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about?
I think just before we go, here in the US, it will be interesting to see how we respond to this. I'm still hearing stories in the news about things like state legislators falsely claiming that critical race theory is being taught in the schools.
Yes.
Back in the day, we had what we called a rally round the flag effect. And that meant that all that kind of stuff is put aside when there's a war. We're not arguing about that right now. That can wait. During World War II, they rationed food and gasoline, and almost all Americans were okay with that. So I think that is the big question is are we capable in America of putting aside what's become our normal politics, which is the culture war, and saying, we really don't have time to argue about this right now. There's something else going on in the world. Or are we not? And the next few days even will probably tell us.
Yeah. Once we've been seeing casualties of Ukrainian fighters and destroying of Ukrainian cities, by the Russians, this may change American perceptions, particularly some on the political right. And what I mean by that is that there are Americans who don't know anything about foreign affairs, and that's far away. It's not their bailiwick. They still into their tribal mindset about blue and red in the United States, as Dr. Smith said. Once they see what the Russians are doing, they may waken up and discover that this is a real problem, and there may be a rallying around of the flag effect. I sure hope so, but it's going to take an effort. I listened to Colonel Vindman the other night, and he was so upset with Tucker Carlson and President Trump and Mike Pompeo, that basically said they'll regret what they've said once Americans realize what the Russians are really up to. That's yet to be seen. But there's a gambit that they're playing that this is a political winner for them. I don't think so. But Mike Pompeo, who has aspirations to be running for president, Donald Trump, who would like to be reelected president, the Russians would like him to be reelected president, and some other Republicans who feel the same way may have to pay a political price for this when all's said and done.
And I've got to go, but I think Dr. Levitt's got a lot of good points. And I might add, one possibility is a deep split in the Republican Party.
Right.
With the Republicans basically representing the two ends, one side being very hawkish about wanting to take on Russia and for the US to rearm, and the other side sympathetic to Putin, with the Democrats in the middle, and President Biden in particular in the middle. And that would make for an interesting political set of situations.
Yep, I totally agree.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.